The sound of Marcus's laughter cut through our marble-floored kitchen like broken glass, each echo bouncing off the custom cabinets I'd personally selected 3 years ago. He was on speakerphone with his business partners again, their voices. A chorus of cruel amusement that made my stomach clench. I swear, watching Elena stumble through that presentation yesterday was priceless, Marcus wheezed, wiping tears from his eyes as he loosened his Italian silk tie. My own wife, trying to pitch her little consulting ideas to real businessmen. The secondhand embarrassment was killing me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. More laughter erupted from the phone. I recognized the voices: Chen from marketing, Roberto Silva from operations, and Thomas Wright from business development. All of them senior executives at Meridian Industries, all of them completely unaware that the woman they were mocking had founded their company 7 years before any of them knew it existed. I continued chopping vegetables for dinner, my knife moving with practiced precision while I listened to my husband of 6 years dissect my supposed failures. The irony was so thick I could taste it, metallic and bitter on my tongue. Remember when she applied for that entry-level position at Meridian last month? Thomas chimed in, his nasal voice grating against my nerves. I mean, we couldn't even put her resume in the maybe pile. It was that bad. The best part, Roberto added with a snort, is how she keeps talking about strategy and market positioning, like she has any clue what those words mean. It's like watching a child play dress up in their parents' clothes. I set down my knife and reached for my wine glass, taking a slow sip of the 2015 Bordeaux Marcus believed he'd chosen from our collection. In reality, every bottle in our temperature-controlled cellar had been selected by me, purchased with profits from the company they thought had rejected me. The application Thomas mentioned hadn't been a desperate job search, it had been my quarterly assessment of middle management. A chance to see firsthand how my own HR department treated candidates they perceived as beneath them. The results had been illuminating and damning. Elena's in her little fantasy world again, Marcus continued, glancing at me with that patronizing smile I'd grown to despise. She thinks she's going to network her way to success at the charity gala next week. I don't have the heart to tell her that nobody there takes unemployed housewives seriously. The charity gala. The annual event where Meridian Industries would announce our largest acquisition to date, a deal I'd been orchestrating for 18 months through a web of shell companies and intermediaries. Marcus would be standing beside me when they announced the acquisition, completely unaware that his wife was the architect of what he'd later call his greatest professional triumph. Maybe we should set up a lemonade stand for her, David suggested, triggering another round of laughter. Something more her speed. I turned away from the counter, studying my husband's face as he reveled in their mockery. When had his features become so sharp, so cruel? Had they always been this way, hidden beneath the charm that had initially drawn me to him at a Stanford alumni mixer 6 years ago? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Back then, I'd been exhausted from building Meridian from a 2-person startup into a mid-sized consulting firm. 3 previous relationships had taught me that success made me a target for gold diggers and social climbers. So I decided to try something different. At that mixer, I'd presented myself as Elena Vasquez, a freelance graphic designer struggling to build her client base. Marcus had seemed different then, supportive, encouraging, someone who claimed to love me for who I was rather than what I could provide. We'd dated for 2 years before I'd carefully orchestrated our marriage, complete with a prenuptial agreement that he'd insisted upon, thinking he was protecting his modest investment portfolio from a woman with no assets. The prenup had been my idea, filtered through my lawyer to Marcus's attorney. Every clause had been designed to protect my true wealth while making Marcus feel superior and secure. He'd signed it smugly, believing he was the financially successful partner in our relationship. You know what's funny? Marcus said, lowering his voice conspiratorially as he moved closer to the phone. She keeps a little notebook where she writes down business ideas. Last week I caught her researching acquisition strategies. Can you imagine? Elena trying to understand corporate takeovers. If only he knew that the notebook he'd glimpsed contained preliminary notes for the charity gala acquisition announcement, written in the same careful handwriting that had signed Meridian Industries original incorporation papers. I've got to go, Thomas said suddenly. My wife's making dinner, and unlike some people, she actually knows how to balance a checkbook. More laughter, then the line went dead. Marcus turned to me with that same condescending smile, his eyes bright with the residual joy of humiliating me in front of his colleagues. Sorry about that, sweetheart, he said, not sounding sorry at all. The guys get a little carried away sometimes. You know how it is, locker room talk. I nodded, returning to my vegetables with renewed focus. Of course. I understand completely. And I did understand. I understood that Marcus had revealed his true character, that the mask of the supportive husband had finally slipped completely away. I understood that his colleagues felt comfortable mocking me because he'd given them permission, probably been feeding them stories about his unsuccessful wife for years. Most importantly, I understood that it was time to end this charade. How was your day? I asked, my voice steady and warm, the perfect imitation of a devoted wife interested in her husband's success. Incredible, actually, Marcus said, loosening his tie further and reaching for the whiskey decanter, also paid for with Meridian profits. We're about to announce something huge at the charity gala. I can't give you details yet, but let's just say your husband is about to become a very important man in this industry. That's wonderful, I murmured, picturing the sealed envelope. In my private office upstairs, the one containing the acquisition documents that would make Marcus the face of a deal he'd had absolutely nothing to do with. I'm so proud of you. He beamed at the praise, completely missing the subtle emphasis I'd placed on certain words. Marcus had always been oblivious to subtext, hearing only what he wanted to hear. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Sarah Chen, my most trusted executive assistant and one of only 3 people who knew my true identity. The text was brief: charity gala seating arrangements confirmed. Everything is in place. Who's texting you? Marcus asked, his tone carrying just a hint of suspicion. Just Rebecca, I lied smoothly, referencing my fictional best friend who existed only in Marcus's mind. She's asking about what to wear to book club tomorrow. Marcus nodded, losing interest immediately. In his world, women's activities were inherently trivial, not worth his attention or concern. I excused myself to check on dinner preparations, but instead of going to the stove, I moved to the window overlooking our backyard. The landscaping had been completed last month, $20,000 worth of Japanese maples and precision-cut grass, all funded by the company Marcus thought had deemed me unemployable. Tomorrow, I would spend the day making final preparations for what Marcus and his colleagues believed would be their moment of triumph. They had no idea they were walking into the most perfectly orchestrated revelation of their careers. Sarah had spent weeks coordinating with the event planners, ensuring that every detail would unfold exactly as I'd envisioned. The seating chart placed Marcus at the head table, right where he'd have the perfect view when they announced that Meridian Industries' mysterious founder and CEO would finally be revealed to the business community. For 7 years, I'd remained anonymous, communicating with my board of directors through encrypted video calls and written correspondence. The business world knew Elena Morrison only as a reclusive genius who'd built a consulting empire while guarding her privacy fiercely. Tomorrow night, they'd discover that the mystery CEO had been hiding in plain sight as Marcus Morrison's supposedly unsuccessful wife. Dinner smells amazing, Marcus called from the kitchen, his voice carrying that false warmth he used when he wanted something. You really are good at the domestic stuff, Elena. Maybe that's your true calling. I smiled at my reflection in the window, seeing not the meek housewife Marcus perceived, but the woman who'd outmaneuvered him at every turn for 6 years. Maybe it is, I called back, my voice carrying across the house like a promise. The charity gala was 36 hours away. In 36 hours, Marcus would discover that his unemployable wife owned 51% of the company where he'd spent 3 years climbing the corporate ladder. In 36 hours, his laughter would turn to silence, and I would finally stop pretending to be anything less than exactly who I'd always been. But tonight, I would play the role one last time. Tonight, I would be Elena Morrison, the struggling wife who cooked dinner while her successful husband regaled his friends with stories of her failures. Tomorrow night, I would be Elena Morrison, CEO of Meridian Industries, and Marcus would learn the difference between those two women. The difference, I reflected as I returned to the kitchen, was everything. The next morning arrived with the crisp precision I'd cultivated in every aspect of my double life. While Marcus showered, I sat in my hidden office behind our master bedroom's walk-in closet, reviewing the final details of tomorrow night's revelation through encrypted communications with my inner circle. The space was small but perfectly organized, a single desk, 3 monitors, and a secure server that connected me to Meridian Industries' global operations. Marcus had no idea this room existed. To him, the closet appeared to dead-end at a wall of evening gowns I rarely wore. Sarah's morning report arrived at exactly 7 a.m., as it had every day for the past 4 years. Charity gala preparations complete. Media contacts confirmed. Board members briefed on revelation protocol. Legal documentation ready for signature. I smiled, remembering the day I'd hired Sarah away from a Fortune 500 company, recognizing in her sharp intelligence and unwavering discretion the qualities I needed in someone who would guard my most dangerous secret. She was one of only 3 people who knew that Elena Morrison and Elena Vasquez were the same person, my lawyer Maria Santos and my head of security David Kim being the others. The shower stopped running. I quickly closed my monitors and slipped back into the main bedroom, settling at my vanity table with a cup of coffee and yesterday's Wall Street Journal, a prop I maintained to support my image as someone trying to understand business. "Morning, beautiful," Marcus said, emerging from the bathroom in a cloud of expensive cologne that I'd bought him last Christmas. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby," I replied, turning a page without looking up. "This article about corporate acquisitions is fascinating. I'm starting to understand how these big deals work." Marcus paused unbuttoning his shirt, glancing over at me with barely concealed amusement. "Oh? And what profound insights have you gleaned?" The condescension in his voice was so thick I could have bottled it. I maintained my expression of earnest concentration, pointing to a paragraph about due diligence processes. "Well, it says here that successful acquisitions require months of preparation and careful analysis of market conditions. The CEO quoted here mentions something called strategic positioning. I think I'm starting to see how these executives think." Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Elena, sweetheart, reading about business is like reading about surgery. Just because you understand the words doesn't mean you could actually perform the operation." I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his wisdom. "You're probably right. It just seems so interesting, though. Like this Meridian Industries deal. That's been in the news, the way they've been quietly acquiring smaller firms to build market share. It's almost like chess, isn't it?" "Chess requires strategy," Marcus replied, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "What Meridian's doing is more like, well, it's complicated. You wouldn't understand the nuances." The irony was delicious. Marcus was attempting to explain my own acquisition strategy to me, getting half the details wrong while delivering his lecture with absolute confidence. The Meridian deal he was referencing had been my 18-month masterpiece, a carefully orchestrated series of purchases that would culminate in tomorrow night's announcement. "Will you be working late again tonight?" I asked, switching to the dutiful wife persona that had served me so well over the years. "Probably. The charity gala is tomorrow, and there are still details to finalize. This could be the biggest night of my career, Elena." He straightened his shoulders, preening slightly. "The partners are finally recognizing my contributions to the company." I watched him in the mirror, studying the man I'd married 6 years ago. Had I ever actually loved him, or had I simply been intrigued by the challenge of maintaining my deception? The distinction seemed less important now, overshadowed by the systematic cruelty he'd revealed over the years. "I'm so proud of you," I said, meaning something entirely different from what he heard. After Marcus left for work, for my company, I allowed myself 30 minutes to drop the pretense completely. I changed into my real clothes, a tailored black pantsuit that cost more than Marcus's monthly salary, heels that commanded attention rather than deflected it, jewelry that whispered wealth rather than shouted desperation. I in my hidden office. I became myself again. Elena Vasquez, CEO of Meridian Industries, reviewed the morning's international reports while sipping coffee from a mug that read, "World's Most Underestimated Boss," a gift from Sarah that had made me laugh until I cried. My first call was with the Tokyo office, where our latest acquisition was integrating ahead of schedule. The second was with our London team, finalizing the presentation that would accompany tomorrow night's announcement. The third was with Maria Santos, my lawyer, who wanted to review the post-revelation protocols one final time. Are you absolutely certain about this timing? Maria asked, her voice carrying the concern of someone who'd watched me build an empire through careful anonymity. Once you reveal yourself publicly, there's no going back to the shadows. I've been hiding for 7 years, I replied, watching the city skyline through my office window. It's time. And Marcus? Have you considered how this will affect your marriage? I paused, thinking about the laughter from last night, the years of systematic humiliation, the casual cruelty he displayed toward anyone he perceived as beneath him. My marriage ended the moment he decided I was someone worth mocking. Tomorrow night just makes it official. After ending the call, I reviewed the dossiers Sarah had compiled on Marcus and his inner circle over the past year. David Chen, 34. Marketing executive with a gambling problem he'd been hiding from his wife. Roberto Silva, 29, operations manager who'd been falsifying his expense reports for 2 years. Thomas Wright, 31, business development director who'd been sharing confidential client information with his brother's competing firm. None of them were irreplaceable. All of them had revealed themselves to be exactly the kind of executives I'd spent years weeding out of successful companies. Tomorrow night's revelation would be followed by Monday morning's housecleaning, and I'd already identified their replacements from within our existing talent pool. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Lunch meeting ran long. Won't be home until late. Order takeout for yourself. I smiled, remembering the days when his casual dismissals had stung. Now they just provided convenient cover for my real activities. I spent the afternoon in a series of video conferences with board members, finalizing the details of my public emergence while Marcus believed I was home researching job opportunities. At 3 p.m., I drove to the Meridian Industries building for the first time in 6 months. The company occupied 43 floors of a downtown skyscraper, its glass exterior reflecting the afternoon sun like a beacon. I parked in the visitor's lot, not wanting to risk Marcus spotting my car in the executive garage. Security recognized me immediately. I'd been careful to maintain relationships with key personnel while keeping my visits minimal. Good afternoon, Ms. Vasquez, the guard said, discreetly checking me in under an alias. Conference room 12 is ready for you. I took the express elevator to the executive floor, passing through hallways lined with awards and achievements that Marcus believed he'd helped earn. The conference room was already occupied by my core team, Sarah, David, Kim, and 3 board members who'd requested this final pre-revelation meeting. Status report, I said, settling at the head of the table. Sarah consulted her tablet. Tomorrow's seating arrangements place your husband directly in line of sight for the announcement. Media has been briefed that Meridian's founder will finally appear publicly, but no details about your identity have been shared. The acquisition documents are ready for your signature. Security concerns? I asked David. Minimal. Your husband and his colleagues have no idea what's coming. I've reviewed their communications for the past month. They're expecting a standard corporate announcement, nothing more. Board member Patricia Wong leaned forward. Elena, I have to ask, are you prepared for the personal fallout? This revelation will end your marriage, possibly create legal complications, certainly generate significant media attention. I thought about Marcus's laughter, about years of watching him take credit for strategies I'd developed, about the way he'd systematically tried to diminish my confidence while living off my success. The marriage was already over. This just makes it honest. We spent the next hour reviewing contingency plans, media response strategies, and transition protocols. Every detail had been anticipated, every potential complication addressed. By the time I left the building, I felt the familiar calm that came with thorough preparation. The drive home took me through the business district where Marcus believed he was building his career. I passed restaurants where he'd entertained clients using company credit cards, shops where he'd bought gifts with bonuses I'd approved, the gym where he'd bragged to his trainer about his wife's inability to find work. Tomorrow night, all of that would change. At home, I found evidence of Marcus's afternoon activities, whiskey glasses on the coffee table, the lingering scent of his colleagues' cigars, crumbs from expensive cheese and crackers I'd unknowingly purchased for their celebration. They'd been here, in my house, probably planning their triumph for tomorrow's gala while mocking my absence. I gathered the glasses and plates, washing them carefully while planning my own celebration. By this time tomorrow, Marcus would understand exactly who he'd been married to for 6 years. His colleagues would realize that every promotion, every bonus, every professional success had been orchestrated by the woman they'd dismissed as unemployable. My phone rang, Marcus calling from his late meeting. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice slightly slurred from what I assumed was client entertainment. "Just wanted to let you know I'll be very late tonight. Big strategy session about tomorrow's announcement." "Of course," I replied, scraping his crumbs into the garbage disposal. "Don't wait up for me either. I have an early morning appointment." "Job interview?" he asked, barely containing his amusement. "Something like that." After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of wine, not the cheap bottle Marcus would expect me to choose, but a 2010 Barolo I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tomorrow qualified. I spent the evening in my hidden office, making final adjustments to the presentation that would accompany my revelation. The slides told the story of Meridian Industries' growth from startup to industry leader, but they also contained subtle references to every strategy Marcus had dismissed, every suggestion he'd mocked, every insight he'd claimed as his own. The final slide contained a single line: "Success belongs to those who build it, not those who claim it." At midnight, I heard Marcus's car in the driveway. I quickly closed my office and slipped into bed, feigning sleep as he stumbled through his nighttime routine. He was drunk enough to be careless, muttering to himself about tomorrow's big announcement. And how impressed I'd be with his success. "Wait until she sees me on that stage," he whispered to his reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Maybe then she'll understand what she married." I smiled in the darkness, thinking about his choice of words. Tomorrow night, Marcus would finally understand what he'd married. But it wouldn't be what he expected. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the little girl who'd watched her father's small business crumble under corporate pressure, promising herself that someday she'd be the one making the decisions. That little girl had become a woman who'd built an empire while her own husband dismissed her as unemployable. Tomorrow night, she would finally get to speak. The morning of the charity gala dawned gray and overcast, as if the sky itself was holding its breath for what was to come. I woke before my alarm, my body thrumming with an energy I hadn't felt in years, the anticipation of finally, completely, dropping every mask I'd worn. Marcus was still unconscious beside me, reeking of whiskey and expensive cologne, his mouth slightly open as he snored. I studied his face in the dim morning light, trying to remember when I'd stopped seeing the charming man I'd married and started seeing the stranger who'd replaced him. My phone buzzed silently on the nightstand. Sarah's message was brief: "Final walkthrough at 10 a.m. Press release ready. Your dress arrived and is perfect. Today changes everything." I slipped out of bed and into my hidden office, powering up the monitors for what might be the last time from this secret location. After tonight, there would be no more hiding, no more pretending, no more carefully maintained double life. The morning reports showed Meridian Industries stock holding steady, unaware of the seismic shift about to occur. Our Tokyo office had closed a major contract overnight. London was reporting record quarterly numbers. The company I'd built from nothing was thriving while my marriage crumbled in the next room. I allowed myself one moment of pure satisfaction before switching to the surveillance feeds David Kim had set up around our house. Marcus's colleagues had been busy. Roberto Silva was already parked down the street, probably waiting to drive with Marcus to their pre-gala strategy session. Even now, they were planning their moment of triumph, completely unaware they were walking into their professional execution. The shower started running in the master bathroom. Marcus was awake. I quickly shut down my monitors and emerged from the closet, settling at my vanity table with a cup of coffee and my usual morning prop. Today, a magazine about entrepreneurship I'd left strategically open to an article about building business acumen. "Morning, gorgeous," Marcus called from the bathroom, his voice carrying that forced cheer of someone fighting a hangover. "Big day today." "The biggest," I replied, meaning something entirely different from what he'd assumed. He emerged 20 minutes later, moving with the careful precision of someone trying to appear sober. His tuxedo hung on the closet door, custom-tailored Italian wool that I'd paid for, though he'd convinced himself it came from his Christmas bonus. "What are you planning to wear tonight?" he asked, adjusting his tie in the mirror. I gestured toward the department store dress hanging on my closet door, a simple black number that screamed, trying too hard, while actually costing less than his pocket square. I thought this would be appropriate. I don't want to embarrass you. Marcus paused, studying my reflection in the mirror with what might have been guilt. For a moment, I wondered if some part of him still remembered the woman he'd claimed to love, the one who'd supported his dreams before he'd decided she was someone worth mocking. Elena, he said slowly, I know the guys and I sometimes, we get carried away. You know we don't mean anything by it, right? It's just what? I asked, meeting his eyes in the mirror. Just that this world we're in, it's competitive. Everyone's fighting for recognition, for advancement. Sometimes that makes people harsh. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his words carefully. I understand. You're saying that success requires a certain ruthlessness. Exactly. Relief flooded his face. I knew you'd get it. That's why tonight is so important, it's my chance to prove I belong at that level. Your chance, I thought, ended the moment you decided I was someone worth belittling. Roberto's car horn echoed from the street. Marcus grabbed his briefcase and kissed my forehead absently, already mentally shifting into his corporate persona. See you tonight, sweetheart. Try not to be too nervous, just smile and let me handle the business conversations. The door closed behind him with a finality that felt prophetic. I watched from the window as he jogged to Roberto's car, both men animated with excitement about their approaching victory. They drove away into the morning traffic, heading toward what they believed would be their professional coronation. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to feel the weight of what I was about to do. 6 years of marriage, even a marriage built on deception, doesn't end without consequence. There would be legal proceedings, media scrutiny, personal and professional fallout that would ripple through both our lives for months or years to come, but as I remembered Marcus's laughter from 2 nights ago, his casual cruelty toward the candidates he dismissed, his systematic efforts to undermine my confidence while living off my success, those 5 minutes of doubt crystallized into absolute certainty. At 9 a.m., I transformed. Gone was the department store dress, the tentative makeup, the slightly slouched posture of someone apologizing for taking up space. In their place, a midnight blue Valentino gown that cost more than most people's cars, diamond earrings inherited from my grandmother, a subtle but unmistakable aura of absolute authority. I drove to the Meridian building in my real car, a silver Aston Martin that Marcus had never seen, registered under a shell company and kept in a private garage across town. The valet's eyes widened as I handed him the keys, probably wondering how Elena Morrison had suddenly acquired such expensive taste. The charity gala was being held in the building's 40th floor ballroom, a space I designed specifically for events like this. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic city views, crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, and an elevated stage provided perfect visibility for major announcements. Sarah met me in the private elevator, her expression mixing professional excitement with personal concern. You look absolutely stunning, she said, then lowered her voice. Are you ready for this? I've been ready for years, I replied, checking my reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls. What's the final status? Marcus and his colleagues arrived an hour ago. They're in the green room, going over talking points for what they think will be their moment of recognition. The board members are positioned throughout the crowd. Media representatives are confirmed and briefed. The acquisition documents are in the podium, ready for your signature. The elevator opened directly into the ballroom's service area, away from the gathering crowd. Through the kitchen's service windows, I could see the early arrivals mingling in the main space, business leaders, politicians, philanthropists, and journalists, all expecting a standard corporate charity event with the added intrigue of finally meeting Meridian's mysterious founder. Your husband just asked the event coordinator if you'd arrived yet, Sarah reported, checking her tablet. He seems concerned about your absence. I smiled, imagining Marcus scanning the crowd for his wife's familiar, unremarkable presence. Let him wonder. What about the others? David Chen is already 3 drinks in and bragging to anyone who'll listen about the big announcement. Roberto Silva is networking aggressively, handing out business cards like confetti. Thomas Wright is in the corner with his wife, probably rehearsing his acceptance speech. Through the service window, I caught a glimpse of Marcus near the bar, resplendent in his custom tuxedo and radiating confidence. He was surrounded by junior Executives and their spouses, clearly holding court about something that was making them laugh. Even from this distance, I could read his body language, chest puffed out, gestures expansive, the unmistakable posture of someone who believed himself about to be crowned. "Ma'am," one of the catering staff approached nervously, "they're asking if you're ready for the presentation setup." I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. The main event was scheduled for 8 o'clock, which gave the crowd exactly enough time to reach that perfect level of anticipation and alcohol consumption. "Begin the final setup," I instructed. "And make sure the media area has optimal sight lines to the stage." As the staff scattered to their final preparations, I took a moment to observe the gathering. Through the service windows, 300 of the city's most influential people, completely unaware that they were about to witness the business equivalent of a public execution. The irony wasn't lost on me that this was the same ballroom where I'd hosted Meridian's first major client presentation 7 years ago, back when the company was just myself and 2 programmers operating out of a rented office space. I'd stood on that same stage, pitching our vision to skeptical investors while Marcus was still managing a small marketing firm across town. Now he worked for me without knowing it, about to be revealed as an unwitting employee celebrating his boss's success while mocking her to her face. "Elena?" Sarah's voice pulled me from my reverie. "It's time." I nodded, smoothing my gown one final time. The woman who walked out of that service area would be Elena Morrison for the last time. The woman who walked onto that stage would be Elena Vasquez, CEO of Meridian Industries, reclaiming her identity after 6 years of hiding. The ballroom had filled to capacity, the conversation level rising as anticipation built for the evening's main event. I moved through the back corridors Sarah had mapped out for me, approaching the stage from behind while Marcus continued holding court near the bar, still oblivious to his wife's presence. From my position in the wings, I could see him clearly now. He was animated, gesturing broadly as he spoke to a circle of admirers that included 2 city council members and a business journalist I recognized from the financial news networks. Whatever story he was telling was generating appreciative laughter and nodding heads. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention," the evening's master of ceremonies announced from the podium, his voice carrying easily over the crowd noise. "We're about to begin this evening's main presentation." I watched Marcus straighten his bow tie and move toward the front of the crowd, positioning himself where he'd have the best view of what he believed would be his professional validation. David, Roberto, and Thomas flanked him, all 4 men practically vibrating with excitement. For 7 years, the MC continued, Meridian Industries has been led by one of business's most enigmatic figures. A visionary who built a consulting empire while maintaining complete privacy, communicating with the outside world only through carefully chosen representatives. Marcus was beaming now, probably thinking about all the times he'd been one of those carefully chosen representatives, never realizing he'd been chosen for his insignificance rather than his importance. Tonight, for the first time, you'll meet the person behind Meridian Industries' remarkable success. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Meridian Industries. I stepped from the wings, my heels clicking against the marble stage with the rhythm of inevitability. The spotlight found me immediately, illuminating the midnight blue gown and diamond earrings while casting my shadow across 300 upturned faces. The crowd's initial polite applause faltered as recognition began to dawn. Gasps rippled through the gathering like stones thrown into still water, creating expanding circles of shock and disbelief. But none of that mattered. What mattered was Marcus's face. I found him in the crowd immediately, watching as his expression shifted from confusion to recognition to absolute, devastating comprehension. His mouth fell open, his champagne glass slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter against the marble floor. "Good evening," I said, my voice carrying easily over the stunned silence. "My name is Elena Vasquez, and for the past 7 years, I've had the privilege of building Meridian Industries from a 2-person startup into the consulting powerhouse you see today." The silence was absolute now, 300 people struggling to reconcile the confident woman on the stage with whatever preconceptions they'd held about Meridian's mysterious leader. "Some of you," I continued, my eyes finding Marcus's face in the crowd, "may know me by a different name. For the past 6 years, I've also been Elena Morrison, devoted wife, unsuccessful job seeker, and according to my husband's colleagues, A woman whose business acumen could fit comfortably on the head of a pin. Marcus's face had progressed from shock to a sickly green pallor. David Chen was swaying on his feet as if the floor had shifted beneath him. Roberto Silva was staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. Thomas Wright appeared to be having difficulty breathing. Tonight, I announced, lifting the acquisition documents from the podium, Meridian Industries is proud to announce our largest acquisition to date, a strategic purchase that will position us as the dominant consulting firm in 3 major markets and increase our global revenue by 40%. I signed the documents with a flourish, the scratching of my pen amplified by the wireless microphone and echoing through the silent ballroom. This acquisition, I continued, represents 18 months of careful planning, strategic positioning, and market analysis. Some of the preliminary work was conducted by what my husband and his colleagues referred to as my little consulting ideas, suggestions they found so amusing during their dinner conversations that they felt compelled to share their entertainment with me personally. The crowd was beginning to recover from their initial shock, murmurs and whispers spreading as the full implications of my revelation began to sink in. I could see phones being discreetly pulled out, fingers flying over screens as the news began to spread beyond the ballroom. I want to thank everyone who made tonight possible, I concluded, my eyes never leaving Marcus's stricken face. Especially those who reminded me that in business, as in life, the last laugh often belongs to the person who was underestimated from the beginning. The applause that followed was uncertain at first, then building to genuine enthusiasm as the crowd processed what they'd witnessed. But I barely heard it. I was watching Marcus stumble toward the exit, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him with each step. David, Roberto, and Thomas followed in his wake, all 4 men moving like survivors of a natural disaster, shell-shocked and directionless. As they disappeared through the ballroom doors, I felt the weight of 6 years of deception lifting from my shoulders. The careful balance, the constant vigilance, the exhausting effort of pretending to be less than I was, all of it was finally over. The woman who stepped down from that stage was no longer Elena Morrison, the unsuccessful wife. She was Elena Vasquez, CEO of Meridian Industries, and she had work to do. The aftermath of my revelation unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. Within minutes of stepping off the stage, I was surrounded by a carefully controlled chaos of congratulations, interview requests, and barely concealed shock from the city's business elite. Elena, or should I say Ms. Vasquez? Patricia Wong, board member and family friend, appeared at my elbow with 2 champagne flutes. I have to admit, even knowing what was coming, watching Marcus's face was enlightening. I accepted the champagne, scanning the crowd for any sign of my husband and his colleagues. They had vanished completely, probably seeking refuge in whatever corner of the building could hide them from the stares and whispers now following their every movement. Ms. Vasquez. A young woman with a press badge pushed through the crowd. Jennifer Hayes, Business Today magazine. Could we get a few words about how you maintained your anonymity for so long while building such a successful company? Before I could respond, Sarah materialized beside me with the practiced efficiency of someone who had anticipated this exact scenario. Ms. Vasquez will be conducting formal interviews tomorrow morning. Tonight is about celebrating Meridian's latest achievement. As Sarah deftly guided the reporter away, my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from David Kim. Subjects have retreated to executive washroom on 35th floor. All 4 present. Audio surveillance active. I excused myself from the congratulatory crowd and made my way to a quiet alcove where I could listen to the feed David had established. Through my wireless earpiece, Marcus's voice came through clearly, raw with panic and disbelief. "This isn't possible," he was saying, his words slightly slurred from the champagne he'd consumed before his world imploded. "Elena doesn't, she can't, she's nobody. She's just my wife. Your wife who owns the company we work for, David." Chen's voice cracked with hysteria. "Your wife who we've been mocking for years while she signed our paychecks." Jesus Christ, Roberto Silva's voice was barely a whisper. All those times we laughed about her unemployment, she was watching us. Evaluating us. Planning this. Through the earpiece, I could hear Thomas Wright being violently sick in one of the stalls, his body rejecting the full implications of what had just occurred. "We need to think," Marcus said, his voice taking on the desperate authority of someone grasping for control. "This doesn't change anything operationally. We still have our positions, our contracts, our what? David interrupted, his voice climbing toward hysteria. Marcus, your wife just revealed herself as our boss in front of 300 people, including half the business media in the city. You think we still have jobs tomorrow? The sound of running water came through the feed as someone splashed. Their face, probably trying to regain composure. When Marcus spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, the dangerous edge of a cornered animal. She planned this, he said slowly. All of it. The marriage, the fake unemployment, the humiliation. She's been planning this for years. The prenup, Roberto said suddenly. Oh God, the prenup. Marcus, you made her sign a prenup protecting your assets, but if she owns the company, I'm fucked, Marcus finished, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. We're all fucked. I removed my earpiece, having heard enough to confirm what I'd expected. The initial shock was giving way to desperate calculation, which meant the real confrontation was still to come back in the main ballroom. The party was reaching full swing despite, or perhaps because of, the evening's dramatic revelation. Business leaders who had initially seemed stunned were now animated with excitement, treating my appearance as the social event of the year. Several were already approaching with acquisition proposals and partnership opportunities, recognizing the shift in the city's power dynamics. Elena. The voice cut through the crowd noise with familiar authority. I turned to see my mentor, Dr. Catherine Mills, the woman who had taught me everything about strategic thinking during my MBA program 15 years ago. When you said you were taking an unconventional approach to corporate leadership, I had no idea you meant this unconventional. Dr. Mills had been one of the few people who knew about my decision to operate anonymously, though even she hadn't known about the marriage deception. Her presence tonight felt like validation from the person whose opinion mattered most to my professional development. Sometimes the best way to understand your competition is to let them underestimate you completely, I replied, accepting her congratulatory embrace. And sometimes, she said with a knowing smile, the best revenge is letting people reveal exactly who they are when they think no one important is watching. Our conversation was interrupted by Sarah's urgent approach. Elena, we have a situation. Marcus is asking security to escort him to your private office. He's claiming spousal privilege and demanding an immediate private meeting. I checked my watch. 9:47 p.m. The main event was winding down, but the real drama was just beginning. Tell security to allow it, I said, ignoring Sarah's shocked expression. But have David monitor everything. If Marcus wants a private confrontation, let's give him one. 20 minutes later, I stood outside my own office door, listening to the sounds of Marcus pacing inside like a caged animal. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I could see him examining the space with the desperate attention of someone searching for evidence of betrayal. The office was exactly what he'd expect from a successful CEO, floor-to-ceiling windows, handcrafted furniture, walls lined with awards and achievements he'd never realized I'd earned. But what he was really looking for was some indication that this had all been an elaborate hoax, that his unemployed wife couldn't possibly be the mysterious business genius he'd heard about for years. I entered without knocking, closing the door behind me with deliberate finality. Hello, Marcus. He spun around, his tuxedo disheveled and his face flushed with alcohol and rage. You lying, manipulative bitch. The words hung between us like a challenge. In our 6 years of marriage, Marcus had never spoken to me with such naked hostility. The mask of the supportive husband hadn't just slipped, it had been torn away completely. Lying about what? I asked, moving to my desk with calm precision. About building a successful company? About being qualified for positions you thought I couldn't handle? About having opinions worth considering? You know exactly what you lied about, he snarled, stalking closer. Everything. Our entire marriage has been a lie. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone. I settled into my chair, gesturing for him to sit across from me like the subordinate he'd always been. You made yourself look like a fool, Marcus. I just provided the stage. He remained standing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. How long? How long have you been planning this humiliation? I wasn't planning anything, I replied honestly. I was just waiting. Waiting for what? For you to show me who you really were when you thought you were safe to do it. The truth of that statement seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to catalog. The job applications, he said suddenly. The interviews. That was all fake. The interviews were real. I wanted to see how my own company treated applicants they perceived as unqualified. Your HR department failed that test spectacularly, by the way. I'll be making changes. And then, the money? The house, the cars, my salary, all mine, I confirmed. Every dollar you've spent for the past 6 years came from the company you thought had rejected me. Every suit you wore to mock my unemployment was purchased with profits from strategies you dismissed as worthless. Marcus sank into the chair across from my desk, his body folding in on itself as the full scope of his situation became clear. The prenup, he whispered. Protects my assets from your debts, not the other way around, I confirmed. My lawyers were very thorough. I'll contest it. I'll claim fraud, misrepresentation. You deceived me about your financial status. I pulled a thick folder from my desk drawer and placed it between us. Marcus, I've been documenting every conversation. Every instance of mockery, every time you or your colleagues treated candidates, including me, with discrimination and cruelty. Would you really like this to become a public court battle? He opened the folder with trembling hands, his face growing paler as he flipped through transcripts, photographs, and recorded conversations spanning years of evidence. This is illegal, he said weakly. You can't record people without their consent. Actually, I can. This is a one-party consent state, and as the owner of Meridian Industries, I have the right to monitor activities on company property. Your lunch meetings, your conference calls, your conversations in company cars, all legal. Marcus closed the folder and stared at me with something approaching awe. You really did plan all of this? No, I corrected. I prepared for the possibility that you would reveal yourself to be exactly the kind of person I hoped you weren't. Unfortunately, you exceeded my worst expectations. He was quiet for a long moment, processing the wreckage of his life. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, the hollow sound of complete defeat. What happens now? Now you have choices, I replied, pulling out a second set of documents. Option 1, you and your colleagues accept immediate termination with standard severance packages. You sign comprehensive NDAs, agree to the existing non-compete clauses, and disappear quietly from the industry. In exchange, none of your documented misconduct becomes public. And Option 2, you fight. Contest the termination, challenge the evidence, make this a public battle. In which case, every instance of discrimination, every recorded conversation, every abuse of company resources becomes part of the public record. Your careers don't just end, they become cautionary tales. Marcus stared at the documents without touching them. You'd really destroy us completely? Marcus, I've spent 6 years watching you destroy other people's dreams for entertainment. Did you think there would never be consequences? The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of 6 years of marriage dissolving into mutual recognition of who we'd always been to each other. I did love you, he said finally, his voice barely audible. In the beginning. I really did. I know, I replied, feeling something that might have been sadness beneath my careful control. But love isn't enough when it comes with conditions. You loved the woman you thought I was, unemployed, dependent, grateful for your support. You never loved the woman I actually am. Marcus stood slowly, moving like someone recovering from a serious illness. At the door, he paused without turning around. The guys? David, Roberto, Thomas. They're waiting downstairs. What should I tell them? Tell them they have until Monday morning to clean out their offices, I said. And Marcus? Tell them their unemployment benefits start immediately. I'm sure they'll find the experience educational. After he left, I sat alone in my office, watching the city lights twinkle below while processing the end of my marriage and the beginning of my authentic life. Somewhere in the building, 4 men were probably drowning their sorrows while planning their next moves, but I had work to do. A company to run openly for the first time, a corporate culture to rebuild, and a reputation to establish as the woman I'd always been beneath the carefully constructed facade. The hardest part was over. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The weekend following the charity gala felt like living inside a hurricane while standing in its eye. The outside world spun with frantic energy, news reports, social media speculation, and phone calls from reporters, competitors, and colleagues, while I remained centered in the calm certainty of decisions finally made. Saturday morning brought me to the Meridian building at dawn, not because I had to sneak around anymore, but because I wanted to experience my own company in complete solitude for the first time in 7 years. I used my real keycard, walked through the lobby without disguise, and took the executive elevator to my office as Elena Vasquez, CEO, without pretense or performance. The morning news was already running the story. Channel 7's business segment featured a split screen showing footage from the charity gala alongside a photo of Elena Morrison from Marcus's social media, the carefully crafted image of the struggling housewife I'd maintained for public consumption. In what industry insiders are calling the business revelation of the decade, the anchor announced, the mysterious founder of Meridian Industries has been hiding in plain sight as the supposedly unemployed wife of one of the company's own executives. I muted the television and turned to my computer, where Sarah had compiled overnight reports. The story had gone viral across professional networks, spawning think pieces about women in leadership, corporate transparency, and the price of underestimating people based on their public personas. More importantly, our stock price had jumped 12% in overseas trading as investors responded positively to finally meeting the leader they'd heard about but never seen. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria Santos. Divorce papers filed this morning. Marcus's attorney wants to schedule mediation for next week. Also, 3 major publications want exclusive interviews. Before I could respond, David Kim's encrypted message appeared. Subject spent Friday night at Morrison residence. Audio indicates they're planning coordinated response. Silva obtained employment attorney contact. Chen researching whistleblower protections. Wright attempting to contact business media. I smiled, settling back in my chair. Let them plot. Every move they made would be documented, and their options had been carefully limited by years of preparation. At 9 a.m., Sarah arrived with coffee and the weekend's accumulating requests. 17 interview opportunities, including 2 national news programs, she reported. 6 potential acquisition offers from companies wanting to partner with the mysterious CEO who's not mysterious anymore. And 1 particularly interesting call from your Stanford Business School alma mater. They want to discuss a case study. The interviews can wait, I decided. But set up meetings with the acquisition prospects for next week. And Sarah? Start scheduling one-on-one meetings with every employee who reported directly to Marcus or his colleagues. I want to understand the full scope of damage they caused. As Sarah left to make arrangements, I allowed myself a moment to process the magnitude of change happening around me. For 7 years, I'd been the invisible hand guiding Meridian's success. Now I would be the public face, the decision-maker whose name appeared in business journals and whose opinions would be sought by media outlets. The responsibility felt both liberating and terrifying. My intercom buzzed. Elena, there's a woman here to see you. Says she's Rachel Martinez, former Meridian employee. She doesn't have an appointment, but she seems persistent. I remembered Rachel, a brilliant marketing strategist who'd been driven out of the company 18 months ago after clashing with David Chen over a campaign he'd later implemented as his own idea, winning an industry award for her work. Send her up. Rachel Martinez entered my office with the cautious energy of someone who'd been burned before but couldn't resist the possibility of vindication. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and the confident posture of someone who'd learned to fight for herself. Ms. Vasquez, she began, then paused. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to address you anymore. I knew you as Elena Morrison when I worked here, but obviously that wasn't. Elena is fine, I said, gesturing for her to sit. I remember your work. Rachel. Your departure was unfortunate. Her laugh held no humor. Unfortunate is one way to put it. Being forced out after David Chen stole my campaign concepts and then claimed I was difficult to work with is another. I pulled her personnel file from my computer, scanning the exit interview notes that painted a picture of exactly the kind of toxic environment I'd suspected was flourishing under my husband's colleagues. Tell me what really happened, I said. For the next 30 minutes, Rachel detailed a systematic campaign of harassment, idea theft, and professional sabotage that went far beyond what I'd documented from surveillance alone. Chen had created an environment where talented women either stayed silent or left, ensuring his mediocre ideas faced no real competition. I have documentation, Rachel said, producing a thick folder. Emails, recorded conversations, witness statements from other employees who were afraid to speak up while Chen had power. I was building a case for a discrimination lawsuit when I decided to focus my energy on rebuilding my career instead. I reviewed her evidence, each document confirming patterns I'd suspected but hadn't been able to prove completely. Chen hadn't just been an incompetent executive, he'd been actively destructive to talented employees who threatened his position. What would you say to coming back? I asked. Not to your old position, but as Director of Strategic Marketing, reporting directly to me. Your first project would be developing an anti-harassment protocol and helping me identify other employees who were driven out by similar circumstances. Rachel's eyes widened. You're serious? Completely. This company needs to rebuild its culture from the ground up, and I need people who understand exactly what went wrong to help fix it. After Rachel left, with a start date of Monday morning and a salary 50% higher than what Chen had been making, I spent the afternoon reviewing similar cases. Sarah had compiled a list of 17 former employees who'd left under questionable circumstances during Marcus and his colleagues' tenure. Each file told a similar story: talented individuals pushed out for challenging the status quo, asking uncomfortable questions, or simply being too competent for insecure managers to tolerate. The systematic nature of it was breathtaking and infuriating. My phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Elena, his voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. We need to talk. Not like yesterday, really. Talk. About our marriage, about what happens now. I'm listening. Can I come up? I'm in the lobby. I considered refusing, then decided that ending our marriage properly required one final honest conversation. 20th floor. Conference room. Being no recording devices, no witnesses. Just us. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat across from me in the same conference room where he'd probably attended dozens of meetings about strategies I'd developed, never knowing his wife was the architect of his professional success. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wearing a wrinkled polo shirt instead of his usual expensive clothing, his eyes red-rimmed from what looked like a sleepless night of drinking and regret. I've been thinking, he said without preamble. About everything you said yesterday, about who I became when I thought it was safe. You're right. I did reveal exactly who I was. I waited, recognizing this as the opening to either genuine accountability or sophisticated manipulation. I remember the man I was when we met, he continued. I supported your dreams, encouraged your ideas, treated you like an equal partner. Somewhere along the way, I started treating you like a reflection of my success, instead of a person with your own value. When? I asked. When exactly did that change? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the conference table. Probably around year 3 of our marriage. When I got promoted to senior account manager and started making real money, or what I thought was real money. I started feeling like I was the successful one in our relationship, and you became a project. Someone I needed to help instead of someone I wanted to partner with. The honesty in his voice was unexpected, and I found myself listening more carefully than I'd intended. I convinced myself I was being supportive, he continued. Encouraging you to find work, offering advice, introducing you to contacts. But really, I was managing you like a problem that needed solving. And when you couldn't solve it the way I expected, you decided I was incompetent instead of considering that you might not understand the situation. Exactly. He looked up at me for the first time since entering the room. Elena, I know this doesn't change anything, but I need you to know, I never meant to become the kind of man who mocks his wife's struggles. I just lost myself somewhere along the way. I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation that had characterized so many of our conversations over the past few years. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected, genuine remorse mixed with the devastating recognition of opportunities permanently lost. What do you want from me, Marcus? Forgiveness? Another chance? Understanding? I want to know if there's any part of the woman I married that doesn't hate the man I became. The question hung between us like a bridge I could choose to cross or burn. I thought about the Marcus I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd celebrated my small victories, listened to my ideas without judgment, treated me like someone whose opinions mattered. That man had been real, even if he'd been slowly consumed by the man who'd replaced him. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "But I can't forgive what you became, and I definitely can't trust you not to become it again. The marriage is over, Marcus. We both know that." He nodded slowly, accepting what I suspected he'd already known. "What about, after? Do we have to be enemies?" "That depends entirely on what you do next. If you take option 1, quiet resignation, signed NDAs, graceful exit, then we can be two people who shared something important that ended badly. If you fight this, if you try to drag me through courts or media battles or public humiliation, then yes, we'll be enemies." Marcus stood, extending his hand across the conference table. "Option 1. For whatever it's worth, Elena, I'm proud of what you built. I wish I'd been smart enough to recognize it when I still had the chance to be part of it." I shook his hand, feeling the symbolic weight of ending 6 years of marriage with a business gesture. It felt appropriate, considering how much of our relationship had been built on professional deception. "Your colleagues?" I asked. "I'll talk to them. David's the wild card, he's angry enough to do something stupid. But Roberto and Thomas will follow my lead if I can convince them it's their best option." After Marcus left, I sat alone in the conference room, processing the unexpected grace note in what had been a symphony of revenge and revelation. Perhaps people could change, could recognize their failures and choose to do better. Perhaps redemption was possible, even for those who'd lost their way completely, but forgiveness didn't require trust, and understanding didn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. Marcus would have to live with the consequences of his choices, just as I would have to live with mine. The afternoon brought more former employees seeking meetings, more reporters requesting interviews, and more business opportunities generated by my public emergence. Each conversation reinforced my decision to end the deception and reclaim my identity completely. As evening approached, I found myself back in my office, looking out at the city skyline from the windows of a building I'd designed, in a company I'd built. Wearing my real name for the first time in years, the phoenix hadn't just risen from the ashes of my false identity, she'd discovered that she'd been flying all along, hidden beneath carefully folded wings that were finally free to spread completely. Monday would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to build something better from the wreckage of what had come before. But tonight, I was simply Elena Vasquez, exactly who I'd always been, finally free to be nothing less. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office as I reviewed the quarterly reports that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Meridian Industries had not only survived the dramatic revelation of my identity, we had thrived beyond every projection I'd made during those careful years of planning in secret. Sarah knocked and entered with her usual precision, carrying the morning's agenda and wearing the subtle smile that had become her signature since we'd stepped out of the shadows together. "The final numbers are in," she announced, setting down a bound report that represented 6 months of rebuilding, restructuring, and remarkable growth. Revenue up 43%, employee satisfaction scores at record highs, and we've received recognition as one of the top companies for workplace culture transformation. I opened the report, scanning figures that told the story of what happened when toxic leadership was removed and authentic talent was allowed to flourish. The marketing division, now led by Rachel Martinez, had launched 3 groundbreaking campaigns that won industry awards. The operations department, restructured after Roberto Silva's departure, had streamlined processes that saved the company millions. Even our HR department, completely overhauled after the discrimination issues came to light, had become a model for other companies seeking to improve their hiring practices. "And the personal front?" I asked, though I could guess the answer from Sarah's expression. "Marcus's divorce was finalized last week. He's moved to Portland, working for a small nonprofit focused on business ethics education. His colleagues have all found new positions. David Chen is teaching high school business classes, Roberto Silva is working in his family's restaurant, and Thomas Wright became a freelance consultant specializing in corporate culture repair." I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been compassion. The men who had once mocked my supposed failures were now learning to rebuild their own lives from positions of genuine humility. Marcus, in particular, had surprised me by choosing work that seemed designed to help others avoid the mistakes he'd made. Any contact attempts? I asked, though this too had become routine. Marcus sent a congratulatory email about the quarterly results. Very professional, no personal content. The others have maintained complete silence as specified in their NDAs. Through my office window, I could see the bustling plaza below where Meridian employees gathered during breaks, their interactions marked by the kind of collaborative energy that had been impossible under the previous regime. The sight never failed to remind me why the months of planning and years of deception had been worthwhile. My intercom buzzed with an announcement that still gave me satisfaction every time I heard it. Ms. Vasquez, your 10 a.m. appointment is here, Dr. Catherine Mills and the Harvard Business School case study team. The next hour was spent with my former mentor and 3 professors who were documenting Meridian's transformation for a case study about corporate culture change. Dr. Mills had been visiting monthly, both as a friend celebrating my emergence, and as an academic fascinated by the methodology I'd used to identify and remove toxic leadership. What we find most remarkable, Professor Janet Chen explained, is how you manage to maintain company performance while completely restructuring the executive team. Most organizations experience significant disruption during such dramatic personnel changes. I leaned back in my chair, considering how to explain something that had taken years to understand myself. The disruption came from the toxic leadership, not from removing it. Once we eliminated the people who were actively undermining collaboration and innovation, the company's natural strengths were free to emerge. But surely there were risks, Professor Michael Torres pressed. Revealing your identity could have damaged investor confidence, created legal complications, generated negative publicity. All true, I agreed. But the alternative was watching talented people continue to be driven away while mediocre managers took credit for work they hadn't done. At some point, the risk of maintaining the status quo exceeded the risk of dramatic change. Dr. Mills smiled with the pride of a teacher whose student had exceeded all expectations. Elena has always understood that leadership isn't about commanding respect, it's about creating conditions where excellence can flourish. After the professors left, I spent the afternoon in one-on-one meetings with employees who'd returned to Meridian after being driven out by my former husband and his colleagues. Each conversation reinforced my conviction that the most important measure of success wasn't quarterly profits or stock prices, but the number of people who felt valued and empowered to do their best work. Jennifer Walsh, a software engineer who'd been marginalized by Thomas Wright for questioning his technical decisions, had developed an innovation that was revolutionizing our client services. Michael Torres, a financial analyst who'd been pushed out for refusing to manipulate data to support Roberto Silva's unrealistic projections, had identified cost savings that improved our profit margins while allowing us to increase employee benefits. Most significantly, the company had become a destination for top talent from across the industry. Word had spread through professional networks that Meridian Industries had transformed from a place where politics mattered more than performance to an organization where merit was genuinely rewarded. As the workday wound down, I found myself in the same conference room where Marcus and I had our final honest conversation 6 months ago. The space had been redesigned since then, brighter lighting, more comfortable seating, windows that opened to let in fresh air. Even the physical environment reflected the company's transformation. Sarah appeared in the doorway with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. I thought you might want to celebrate privately before tonight's anniversary party. The anniversary party, 6 months since the charity gala revelation, being celebrated by the entire company as a turning point in Meridian's history. The irony wasn't lost on me that an event I'd planned as personal revenge had become a symbol of organizational renewal. Sometimes I wonder, I said, accepting a glass of champagne, if I would have chosen a different path if I'd known how much work the aftermath would require. Sarah considered this seriously, as she did most questions. Do you regret it? I thought about the question while watching employees gather in the plaza below for the outdoor celebration we'd organized. Food trucks, live music, and informal presentations about company achievements, a far cry from the formal, hierarchical events we'd hosted during Marcus's tenure. No, I said finally. But I understand now that revenge was just the beginning. The real work was everything that came after, rebuilding trust, establishing new systems, proving that a company could be both profitable and humane. And your personal life? Sarah asked gently. Any regrets there? I smiled, thinking about the question that had occupied much of my reflection over the past months. The divorce had been finalized with minimal drama, thanks to the prenuptial agreement. That had protected my assets while leaving Marcus with enough to start over. My true identity was now public knowledge, which meant dating would be complicated by my professional status and the media attention that still occasionally followed major business decisions, but for the first time in 7 years, I was completely authentic in every aspect of my life. No false names, no pretended poverty, no carefully maintained facades. The freedom was intoxicating, even if it came with complications. I'm learning to be Elena Vasquez in all contexts, I replied. It's more challenging than I expected, but also more rewarding. Through the window, I could see the evening's first guests arriving for the anniversary celebration. Board members, clients, employees, and their families, all coming together. To mark not just a date on the calendar, but a fundamental shift in how we understood success and leadership. Elena? Sarah's voice carried a note of formality that meant she had something important to say. I've been offered a position as Chief Operating Officer at a startup in Silicon Valley. The opportunity is incredible, and I wanted you to hear about it from me before making any decisions. The news hit me harder than I'd expected. Sarah had been my anchor through the most difficult period of my professional and personal life, the person who'd helped me navigate the complexities of living a double identity and then emerging from it successfully. What are you thinking? I asked, though I already knew the answer from her expression. I'm thinking that I've learned everything I can in my current role, and you've built something here that can thrive without me. It might be time for both of us to explore what comes next. I felt a moment of panic, the fear of losing someone who'd been essential to my success, followed immediately by pride in her growth and excitement for her opportunities. This was what good leadership looked like, developing people so well that they eventually outgrew their positions. When would you start? Not for 2 months. I want to make sure the transition is seamless, and I'd like to help you find and train my replacement. I stood up, walking to the window where I could see the anniversary celebration taking shape below. 2 months to find someone who could fill Sarah's role, knowing that no one could truly replace the person who'd been my closest collaborator through the most transformative period of my career. I'll miss working with you, I said honestly. But I'm proud of you for recognizing when it's time to take the next step. Elena, Sarah said, joining me at the window, you taught me that success isn't about staying comfortable in roles that no longer challenge us. Sometimes growth requires leaving behind what's familiar. The words echoed thoughts I'd been having about my own future. Meridian Industries was thriving, the culture transformation was complete, and the company could clearly succeed without the kind of intensive oversight I'd provided during the rebuilding period. Perhaps it was time for me to consider what came next in my own evolution. Have I mentioned, I said with a smile, that I've been approached about writing a book? The Hidden CEO, Leadership Lessons from 7 Years in the Shadows. Sarah laughed. The first genuine laugh we'd shared since she'd announced her departure. That sounds like the kind of project that would keep you busy while figuring out your next big challenge. As evening settled over the city, we made our way downstairs to join the anniversary celebration. The plaza was filled with people whose lives had been touched by the events that began 6 months ago in this same building, employees who'd been empowered to excel, former colleagues who'd found new purposes, clients who'd benefited from improved services, and families who'd watched their loved ones rediscover their professional passion. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and sharing stories about the transformation we'd accomplished together. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about the revenge I'd taken on people who'd underestimated me, it was about the positive change that had emerged from their removal. Near the end of the evening, I found myself standing alone for a moment, watching the celebration continue around me. The woman who'd once sat in a hidden office, watching her husband mock her supposed failures, felt like a character from someone else's story. In her place stood Elena Vasquez, CEO of Meridian Industries, author of her own success, and architect of an organizational culture that valued authentic excellence over political maneuvering. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, I wondered if it might be Marcus, breaking the no-contact agreement we'd maintained since the divorce. Instead, the message was from Jennifer Walsh, the software engineer whose return had sparked our technical innovation. Thank you for creating a place where people like me can succeed. 6 months ago, I thought my career was over. Tonight, I'm celebrating the patent approval for the system that's revolutionizing our industry. None of this would have been possible without your courage to change everything. I looked around at the celebration, at people laughing, networking, sharing ideas, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than fear, and realized that this was what victory actually looked like. Not the moment of dramatic revelation that had ended my marriage and destroyed my husband's career, but the months of careful work that had built something better from the ruins of what came before. The revenge had been satisfying, but temporary. The reconstruction had been challenging, but permanent. As the evening wound down and employees began to head home to their families, I remained in the plaza, taking a final moment to absorb the scene. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Sarah's replacement to find and train, strategic decisions about the company's next phase of growth, personal choices about my own future direction. But tonight, I was simply Elena Vasquez, exactly who I'd always been, finally free to be nothing less. The woman who'd once been mocked for her unemployment had built an empire. The wife who'd been dismissed as incompetent had revolutionized an industry. The person who'd been underestimated had proved that the last laugh often belongs to those who were patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to reveal their true strength. And in the end, that revelation had been worth every moment of the long journey that led to it. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.